The purpose of today's session is to present all key aspects, frameworks, structure, desired results, and share lesson learned. I'm Renata Ribinskaitė, Project Team Leader of Social Innovation and Transnational Initiative Division at Lithuanian European Social Fund Agency, and I will guide you through this event today. We have with us today key leaders in Europe who are supporting this initiative and activities. First of all, Fabian Levy, who is acting as head of unit European Globalization Adjustment Fund from European Commission. Dear Fabian Levy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Renata. Well, I'm very pleased. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to open this event, because indeed the ALMA initiative is under the remit of my unit in the European Commission. Well, I will start by briefly recalling a little bit of background about ALMA. Some of you may remember that the ALMA initiative was announced by the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in her speech on the State of the Union back in September 2021. And at the time, she stressed that Europe needs all of its youth. And she continued by saying we must step up our support to those who fall into the gaps, those not in any kind of employment, education, or training. So this, I think, is good to always keep in mind that this is the overarching objective of the ALMA initiative. The ALMA initiative is first and mostly an active inclusion measure. It focuses on the most disadvantaged young people, the young people who are further away from the labor market, and in particular, those who are not in any kind of an employment, education, or training. The ALMA initiative offers these young people a work experience in another member state after, of course, an appropriate preparation, and also with a personalized follow-up once they're back in their home country. The aim is to provide them with the opportunity of an experience abroad, which would help them to integrate in the job market and more widely into society when they come back to their home member states. I should say also, and you will hear more on that, we have with us a very experienced colleague, Bettina Reuter, who will speak later on, because it's important to keep in mind that ALMA, although as such it's new, but it's very much inspired by a cross-border mobility scheme for disadvantaged young people, which was set up and implementing by Germany under the ESF since 2008. And then this was expanded in 2012 by an ESF-supported transnational network of 15 member states. And then as of 2015, through a coordinated call, the so-called TLN mobility, which is very much the inspiration behind ALMA. Now, the ALMA initiative itself will be programmed under the ESF Plus at regional or national level. And here I should say that already we have received the intention of 16 member states have indicated their intention to implement ALMA. So this is very good news indeed. Now, very briefly on the purpose of the call, very briefly, because other speakers will provide you with much more detailed information on this. This call, it's important to bear in mind, first of all, that this call is a unique opportunity. For ALMA, it's a one-off, because as I said, ALMA is to be implemented under the shared management component of ESF+. But this call is precisely, the objective of this call is precisely to prepare the ground for wider implementation of ALMA within the ESF Plus. So it's a one-off opportunity for pilot actions to be further disseminated within member states. Of course, this call will be particularly useful for member states or regions which have no previous experience in this type of operation, but it will also be useful for member states or region in which there were already similar operations taking place, because it will help them disseminate further and scale up this type of initiative. So really, I insist on the fact that we're very much looking forward to as many good applications in this call, because it will be decisive for the good launch of the ALMA initiative under the ESF Plus. So I will not elaborate further, because you will have all the detailed explanation on how the call will work and how to apply practical information in the course of the morning. So I will now stop. I'm sure this information session this morning will be very useful for all of you, and I wish you a very good day.
Thank you, Fabian, for your welcome words. I hope this program comes to fruition successfully and addresses significant challenges involved scaling innovation in the public system. And now I would like to welcome my colleague Neringa Poškutė, Head of Social Innovations and Transnational Initiative Division at the European Social Fund Agency. Dear Neringa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Renata. Good morning. Very warm welcome to this first gathering online of people involved in joining forces of striving to very important mission, promoting the social empowerment of disadvantaged young people working together in the European context. I'm Neringa Poškutė, Head of Social Innovations and Transnational Initiatives Division, and I'm extremely delighted to see in our virtual arena our 220 participants now, and the number is increasing from 29 countries. I mean, representatives from the European Commission and also my colleagues. We are glad to start the first information session on ALMA call, organized in the framework of the European Social Fund Plus, Social Innovation Plus initiative. And the focus of this info session is to touch a spectrum of benefiting themes that will guide and consult you on further development, the applications for ALMA call, such as the project design and logical framework, experiences of the TLN mobility programs, also expenditures eligibility rules, application forms and assessment and selection process. Our team will strive to become partners for you in the preparation process of the applications and ready to share the experience gained and provide you with consultations. And thank you so much to the colleagues at the European Commission for being in really very close contact with us all the time during the preparation phase for ALMA call. And thank you for my team for extremely responsible preparatory work and also huge efforts to make this event happen. And we all do believe that after this event, everyone is leaving more informed, more inspired with new visions and skills, and motivated to become factors of change. And I would like to wish all of you a bold and ambitious start of ALMA call, culminating in the results achieved to successfully navigate needs, labor market changes, and to fully engage them in the society. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Neringa, for your welcome words. And I would like to give you a brief overview of participants from different countries that have registered for this event. Hopefully, most of them are participating today. And the type of organization they are from. We're pleased that participants from all over Europe Union have registered on this information session. Here you can see that majority of participants is from Spain, very active society. 25% from all the registered participants. Then we have 43 participants from Poland, 35 participants from Italy. Also, our call attracted participants from UK, USA, and Kosovo. The next slide shows the type of organization to which the registered participants belong. For example, 89 participants classified themselves as state sector, 71 participants classified as NGOs, and 8 participants as joint stock companies. The majority of the participants attributed themselves as other sectors, of which are education companies, universities, vet companies, non-profit organizations, and etc. Before we turn to presentations, I'd like to provide some technical information for you. Should you have questions, please write them in chat box and they will be answered after presentations, and the rest of the questions will be answered after the event in questions and answers format. I am pleased to announce that we have posted the first questions and answers section in our website, and you may already find some of your questions answered there. So the next presenter is my colleague Miglė Aleksonytė, Head of Project Management Group from European Social Fund Agency. Her presentation will cover project design, eligible activities, possible beneficiaries, and partners' desired results. Now it's my pleasure to yield the floor to Miglė Aleksonytė.
Thank you, Renata. Thank you, Fabian and Neringa, for nice welcome words. Also, good morning, still an early morning to our participants from the western part of the European Union, from Portugal, Spain, who are participating so actively, and almost good afternoon to our eastern part of the Europe. This is the beauty of Europe, but also it requires some accuracy, for example, when submitting the applications. So please do not forget to submit them in Central European time. In my presentation, I will briefly present main aspects of the ALMA call, and all of this will be explained in many more detail in the following presentations by my colleagues. So let me open the presentation part. The main aspects of the ALMA call. So the call is intended to the European mobility and social inclusion for integrating disadvantaged young people who are not in employment, education, and training, so-called NEETs. The call was published almost a month ago, and the expected deadline, as you probably might know, is in 1 month and a half ahead. It is on the 15th of March. Indicative overall grant budget designated for this call is 15 million euros. This is the grant part. And the indicative budget for the individual project ranges between 300,000 to 650,000 euros, plus 20% of co-financing, which is required in this call. The expected duration of the projects under this call is 18 months in total. And later you will see how it may be divided into the design stages. Next slide, please. What is this call for? So Fabian explained it briefly. And of course, the main goal is to help member states to integrate ALMA in their ESF Plus programs. To be implemented under the shared management by piloting or scaling up ALMA type of operations targeting the disadvantaged young people aged from 18 to 29, in line with the ALMA manual, which will be presented by already mentioned our expert Bettina Reuter just right after my slides. Who may apply? The call is addressed to public and private bodies established in one of them EU member states, irrespectively whether or not ALMA is already included under ESF Plus shared management in their country or region. This means that it doesn't matter if your country chose to implement ALMA under the shared management or not. Anyway, organizations from all the countries may apply under this call. The target group has already been presented. It is young people aged from 18 to 29 who are not in education, employment, and training. And the duration of the project in total is 18 months, and it may be split up into phases. The first phase is a startup phase that could last for 4 months. But if you already have transnational partners, this part may be skipped. And the second phase, which wouldn't be able to be skipped off, so the implementation, which should last not longer than 14 months. Next slide, please. So what is the first phase? It is a startup phase, and the main activities and the financing provided in this stage might be for those following two purposes. First of all, to build up partnerships and define the roles of actors within a member state or a region. And the second one, to build the transnational partnership with the relevant actors in at least one receiving member state. All the abbreviations and definitions will be explained later in the following presentations in more depth. And the deliverables in this startup phase are the following. The partnership agreements, signed memorandums of understanding between the beneficiary and national and transnational partners. So the deliverable of the first activity is the partnership agreement with the national partner, and the second one is with the transnational partner or partners if you have more than one. Next slide, please. The second phase, implementation phase, can last up to 14 months. And very briefly about the financing and the activities to be implemented under this phase. There are 5 main activities, which are the following. Preparation, meaning the selection of needs and their preparation for their mobility. The second activity is the mobility of the young people for 2 to 6 months of work placements, accommodation, social activities. Minimum 2 groups of 8 to 12 young people can be sent to the placements in another member state. The follow-up with the young people after their stay abroad, including counseling, professional guidance, and etc. The fourth activity could be the final report, lessons learned, and future plans. And then last but not least activity is the dissemination of experience and the best practices. So this is, if it's possible to say so, a lot of activities, but the deliverable of this implementation phase may be one. It's a final report lessons learned and future plans, including analysis of the results and impact of the project, lessons learned, recommendations, and the future plans of scaling up, improving ALMA deliverables. Yep, next slide, please. And the potential beneficiaries and partners, as you may see and probably have read in the call conditions, are you can choose from the variety. There are almost no limitations on that. It may be from NGOs, third sector, voluntary, youth and non-profit organizations, local authorities and municipalities, schools, job centers, public employment services, employment agencies, vocational education and training providers, agencies responsible for skills validation, lifelong research centers and organizations, associations and representatives of those involved in BT, etc. Next slide, please. Transnational partnership, as it has already been mentioned, it's very important and probably the most important part of this call. Under this call, all projects must establish at least one partner from another member state. If not concluded by the time of application submission, the transnational partnership can be finalized after the startup phase, for which 4 months are provided. To facilitate the search for a transnational partner, a database is available at the following link. The slides of all the presentations will be provided to you just right after this event, and you may use all the links. This database includes all project operators that have been selected in the context of the TLN mobility program. But we kindly ask you, after this event, when we send you the evaluation form of this event, not only for evaluating our presentations and our event, but also for those who are keen on finding transnational partners and who do not know their potential partners yet. You may choose to other questions in this report and to fill in a very brief and basic information about your organization, and it may be published in our website next to the call documentation. If you wish to do so, this could be some help to you to finding local or transnational partners. So please take 5 or 10 minutes to fill in this event evaluation form, and maybe this will help you to finish the first startup phase just before the submitting the application. Next slide, please. Now, very briefly about the expenditures that might be incurred in a startup phase. Expenditures for activities in this phase can be submitted based on unit costs and real cost. A lump sum for activities of the startup phase will be established during the assessment of application phase based on the draft budget submitted and linked to work packages. And all the information about the expenditures, unit costs, real costs, lump sums, our prepared calculators to help you to program the budget of this project will be presented in very detail in my colleagues' presentations. Next slide, please. Expenditures for activities in the implementation, the last phase, can be submitted using European Union level ALMA simplified cost options and FINLC, which is financing not linked to cost, based on the delegated act by the European Commission for piloting exchanges. Real costs for preparation of the final report and dissemination may be provided. Next slide, please. And very briefly about the structure of work packages that you will have to fill in in the electronic application form. Here are our suggested work packages, and they should be followed when filling in the application. So for the startup phase, we highly recommend to have only one work package, the first one, in which such activities, as already mentioned by me, searching for national and transnational partners may be included. The deliverables of this phase, as mentioned, are two memorandums, at least two memorandums, one with the national partners and the second one with international partners. Implementation phase should consist of three more work packages, which should be the following. Work package 2, the first one in the implementation phase, but the second in the whole project, should be meant for implementation, participants' mobility, and a follow-up. The third work package should be assigned to preparation of the final report for the lessons learned and future plans to be described. Fourth work package should be meant for the dissemination of experience and best practices. And all these last three work packages may result to one deliverable, the final report, lessons learned, and future plans. And what we want to emphasize at this stage, that you shouldn't make up and assign any work package to the management cost, because they all will have to be included in the indirect cost, which will be presented later. Yes, please, next one. And very briefly about the theory of change, upon which is the application, main part of the application composed. Those who are familiar with theory of change or other logical matrices that have to be filled in the when preparing the different kinds of projects, so it will not be a difficult task. The activities, outputs, short-term and long-term outcomes should be described in this part of the application. Activities, they are needed to reach your outcomes. Autofill from previous forms will be provided, and this also will be detailed, presented in detail with my colleagues. The outputs and deliverables, these are the tangible results that you produce through your activities. Examples of them may be number of targeted beneficiaries, meaning organizations, number of needs that you involve in the project, percentage of completion of activities, percentage of increase in learning outcomes, etc. Short-term outcomes, they are expected from the project interventions. This may be described as changes in learning possibilities, awareness raising, knowledge improvement, attitudes, change in attitudes, skills improvement, opinions changed, aspirations taken, and motivations increased. These are just examples. Long-term outcomes impact is that you hope to observe beyond your intervention time frame. This may be changes in conditions of needs, living conditions, working, local unemployment rate, and etc., as well as changes in social context, environmental characteristics. There will also be a part in the application form, the problem statement, which will have to be filled in, writing the problem statement that resulted from your problem analysis. They may be as follows: social innovation goal, explaining the objective of the social innovations planned in the project, planned number of target group members, where you can indicate a number of participants. Next slide, please. And here is the forecast or the timetable for implementing this ALMA call. So by now, only 2 dates are very precise. So it is the call publication date, which was in the mid-December, and the application submission deadline, which is on 15th of the March. The rest of the deadlines and of their timing will highly depend on the amount of the applications that we will receive on the 15th of March. Nevertheless, we will do our best and put a lot of efforts to finish the assessment of applications as soon as it is possible. The plan is to do that by the end of June of this year, and to finish also by June the selection of applications, and already to have a decision which applications may be recommended for their financing. We also highly expect that the signature of grant agreements and preparation for that will be done through August and September, and at the end of September or at the early beginning of the October, we hope already to have the grant agreement signed, and the projects hopefully will begin. After the signature of grant agreements, we plan to organize applicant and beneficiaries training events. Hopefully they will be on site, but of course this information will follow after some time, hopefully in this September or October. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Thanks for allocating time. And of course, I wish you the best of luck in finding local, regional, and especially national partners, making good partnerships, and the most important, helping our young people of Europe to be more self-confident and to have as many as possible possibilities to integrate to the labor market. Thank you.
Thank you, Migla, for your presentation. And I see we have lots of questions, and we'll try to answer some of them. So the first question, just a minute. The first question is, what is the difference between beneficiaries and partners of the project?
Is this question for me? I believe so.
If you can answer, yes.
Yeah, so the beneficiary, I mean, in simple words, not to talk about very difficult legal descriptions. So the beneficiary is the main organizer of the project with the organization in any of the member states that will lead the project. In ALMA terms, which will be explained just right after my presentation in more depth, if you are not yet familiar with ALMA definitions. So the organization will be the sending organization, which will sign the main grant agreement with our agency for financing of this project, and will have to introduce all the partnerships, local and transnational, as has just been presented in my slides. With the partners, our agency will not sign any grant agreements or some other agreements. This will be conducted with the main beneficiary only, and he will be the one that receives the funding and then allocates it to all the partners involved. As well, he will be responsible for all the activities and deliverables of the project.
Thank you, Migla. Then we have second question. If you can skip the first phase and the second phase lasts a maximum of 14 months, does this mean that program runs for 14 months?
Yes, indeed.
Easy one.
Short one.
Next question is about would UK organization be eligible to apply as project partner or consultant?
Yes and no. As it has been mentioned, eligible beneficiaries and eligible partners, an eligible project group, they are from European member states. If to talk about the beneficiaries and partners legally binded and legally involved in the project. Could you please, Renata, remind me the second part of the question? Was it a supplier?
The second is that he can apply as project partner or consultant.
Yeah, and of course there are no requirements of the who provides services for the project or consults or I don't know, make some reports or whatever. Yeah, so.
Thank you. Next question is Kosovo eligible as country to be considered for the grant? So it's probably the same answer as previous.
Yes, unfortunately, it is the same answer that this call is limited to European member states only to participate as beneficiary or a partner.
Thank you. Next question is about can a partner be somebody who is not a member of partner database?
Oh, yes, of course. That's definitely not limited. The partner database of TLN Mobility that I have briefly mentioned, it's just a recommended site, which was kindly created and then provided for us by our German partners. But as I also mentioned that we are very eager to provide you with all the help that we can have. So we will, as I mentioned in this event evaluation form, if you are willing and if you provide your information about the organization to be published on our site, so we will also make some sort of new additional partner database in our web page. But of course, nobody is limited to participate in the call if he or she, meaning organization, is not included in any of those databases.
We still have some time. So the next question is it mandatory to have a national partnership beside the transnational one?
It is not mandatory to have national partner, second and third representative from the country, but of course it is highly recommended to have them because as you probably already read or saw in my presentation, and definitely will hear a lot if in Bettina's presentation, there are many tasks that should be involved and taken care of in this project. And I would suggest and believe that it would be definitely easier to do that and with the partners and to share the responsibilities within few organizations. But yeah, in general, if it is possible to organize everything in a beneficiaries organization in the sending country, so then it is not mandatory. But also, as you may read or you will hear in our presentations, there is also some priority criteria for involving right and responsible partners into this project. So it's also an additional plus to have them. But of course, the first thing is necessity, not the priority criteria.
Okay. So the next question is also about how can we register in partner search database? Probably you mentioned before that after this information session, we'll have survey and will be sent out and allowing participants to indicate their contact details and information on the possibility of being a host or sending organization. And
yes,
all information will be published in our website. The next question is about the signed memorandum with the national partner should be done during the application phase. Question about first signed memorandum.
With the partners, local
national partners.
National partners. Actually, yeah, it of course it can be done till the submission of the application, as I mentioned. If you do not want or to implement the first phase, so if you want to skip it, but of course it's totally legal and totally possible to use the opportunity of having of finding those partners during the startup phase, which starts after the signature of the grant agreement. So meaning somewhere early in this autumn. And yes, it means that if you do not have the first deliverables until the submission of the application, which is on the 15th of March. So yeah, of course, you may search for those partners using all the time till signing the grant agreement if your application is successfully selected.
Okay, and the next question is related to this one. It's the question is it possible for applicant to partner with more than one national partner, or is it limited to only one?
If I understand the question right, so no, there are no limitations for partners, either it is the national or transnational ones. No, you may include them as much as you wish, as much as is necessary, of course, bearing in mind all the organizational aspects that you will have to face if you have a very huge amount of partners.
We still have some minutes, so the question is about when actually can start the project, after approval of project application form or already after submission of application form?
As it is written in the call conditions, the project itself, to be more correct, the financing, the expenses will be eligible from the moment then that you submit the application. So the implementation may start from that time.
Okay, one more question.
Oh, if Renata, if I can add, but of course it's also written in the call conditions, and I have to also emphasize that if you start the activities, and especially if you experience the expenses from the submission of application, of course, it has to be highlighted that it is on your own risk, because nobody at that time knows which applications will be selected and which and with whom grant agreements will be signed. So of course, it's always safer to wait for the signature of the grant agreement, that everything would be legal, but there is a possibility, yeah, to start them early.
And the last question is about Youth group. Question is, should youth group be between 8 to 12? And is it 8 number of participant mandatory minimum?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Thank you, Migla. So now we can go to the other presenter, and I'm very extremely fortunate and grateful to welcome one of the pioneers in the development of ALMA initiative, thematic expert, youth mobility coordinator, TLN Mobility Network 2013-2021, Bettina Reuter. Her presentation is grounded in practical examples of the previous experience implementing TLN mobility projects, overcome challenges, and lesson learned. Dear Bettina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Renata, for this kind introduction and kind words. Good morning, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome for me as well. So I'm really, really glad to be able here to present the experiences of the TLN mobility programs on behalf of the TLN, my colleagues from the TLN Mobility Network. And I will focus a bit more than on this, implementation aspect and the content. So Mikle was talking about the call requirements, and I will go then to the different phases. So once you have been selected for the program, and we'll talk a bit about the practical operational activities there. So next slide, please. Here you see it's just a visualization of what Fabienne has talked about. So the ALMA core elements, it's the project cycle, the learning experience embedded in this project cycle. It's the target group, and it's the partnership principle, which is really important and which I will talk about then later on when coming to the project setup. As Fabienne already mentioned, it's based on the scheme and experience of the TLN mobility members, and it were eight programs, TLN programs, which were implemented since 2015. And since this presentation is about these experiences, let me give you a short overview then on the TLN Mobility Network in the next slide. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So TLN Mobility was set up in February 2013 and comprised at that time 50 member states and regions who wanted to implement mobility programs for disadvantaged needs under their ESF operational programs. And at that time, it was quite new and quite challenging. So in 2013-14, the TLN jointly developed a coordinated call and a manual of guidance for the mobility programs to be launched under this scheme by partners. And this coordinated call and manual included common parameters on the target group, on the implementation structures, and eligibility of costs, and most important, quality standards for all phases of the project cycle. Since 2015, as said before, TLN mobility programs have been successfully in place in 8 member states and regions, and the two graphics on the right show the budget spent from each partner and the number of participants taking part in the TLN programs, as well as the integration rate, which is quite high. Next slide, please. So the question is, how could these success rates be explained? And as program evaluations have shown, one main factor was an enormous increase of competence participants gained through their stay abroad. So personally and socially, in terms of self-motivation, independence, self-confidence and the ability to deal with conflicts and work in teams, but also a change of mindset regarding labor market opportunities and labor market activity. So like openness towards mobility, which together with practical professional experience sometimes offer job opportunities that participants did not consider before, and more flexibility and own initiative on job applications. Next slide, please. So because of these good results and all the experience on the ground, the European Commission set up the ALMA program, and in April 2022 published the ALMA manual. The ALMA manual, which was already mentioned by Migle as well, is really a core document which I can recommend warmly to you, because it's a 50-page document which should help member states and regions and projects in planning and implementing this ALMA initiative. It provides a framework for transnational cooperation under ALMA at the level of program management and project management, and sets out quality criteria for all phases of the ALMA project. It also includes examples from the TLM mobility programs, the previous ones, and proposals on different models of implementation of these programs. Next one. So the manual contains 6 chapters, and section 2 to 5 focus on program management and thus addressing more managing authorities and implementing bodies, whereas chapter 6 is meant for the practical implementation on project level. And I will focus, because this is an info session for project operators, I will focus in the next minutes more than on this chapter 6 and the minimum quality standards for all phases. But as Migle already mentioned, the ALMA initiative is meant or can be implemented by shared management under the ESF operational programs, regional, national ones, which was the case for the TLM mobility programs. And it can be implemented now under this ALMA central call. So the manual is meant then for both purposes. I would like to say a few more words then on the target group, because that is the core why we set these quality criteria. So the target group is most disadvantaged young people between 18 and 29 now for the ALMA call. And although disadvantage is a complex notion comprising many different groups, but what most of these groups have in common is a poor self-confidence, a weak motivation, negative perception often of education and training, because they have or may have experienced many failures already in their life, and a little self-awareness of own abilities and potential. And thus, this target group is facing problems in accessing education and training. This very often leads to a vicious circle, which the ALMA initiative wants to intercept and turn into a virtuous cycle, not circle, cycle. Next one. So, transnational work with underprivileged groups poses a set of challenges. The target group itself, how to reach the target group, how to involve them and cooperate with job centers and with enterprises and employers, how to set up this transnational cooperation, which is necessary if you send young people away for placement in a foreign country. And last not least, the follow-up, what comes after the traineeship abroad, because the ALMA initiative and TLM mobility programs were not about mobility, but the purpose was to use mobility as a vehicle to integrate then the youngsters into education or training or employment. So that's the big difference to Erasmus Plus, for instance. And thus the follow-up phase is really essential, and I will come to that again later then when going through the different project cycle phases. So in order to address them, first on a general level, all the quality criteria were set, development of quality standards for all phases of the project in order to ensure a high quality of the whole program, which is a prerequisite for the success. Then the regional cooperation networks, active involvement of enterprises and job centers, public employment services, youth organizations, etc. The dual competence of actors, so to be familiar with the target group, but also to have some experience or transnational collaboration. And the transnational project has to be an integral part of the local regional labor market integration. I will come to that in the later on in the follow-up phase, because that's also a quite important issue. And then the dissemination of results and experience on national and EU level. Next one. So, as said before, I will really concentrate now on chapter 6, the project cycle and the different phases on this: project setup and management, participant recruitment and selection, participant preparation, work-related learning experience abroad, and the follow-up phase. These minimum quality standards represent a quite extensive section in the ALMA manual. It's about 20 pages. And because this is an info session for you as project operators and potential applicants for the ALMA call, I will look at all the different elements that transnational mobility have to cover and project operators have to plan for when applying for funding to the national regional calls. Let me just see. Yes, so I will start with the project setup, and the main elements for the project setup is the setup of the national regional partnership and the transnational agreement. And I will go through this in mentioning, so first, what is the challenge, how to address them, because that's why the requirements are there for ensuring a high quality, and giving some then examples of activities and how to address these challenges. Next one. So now we come to the partnership, and I'd like to expand a bit on Miguel's explanation. Yes, even if it's not mandatory, it's really, really important that the project has all relevant actors on board in order to successfully implement this project. So all relevant partners mean partners who have access to the target group and know how to work with them, but also who have contacts to companies and local employers, because that's the purpose of this program, the final purpose of this program, to get participants reintegrated into some education or training or employment. So these regional cooperation networks are really, really important. And if you as a project operator have all those actors on board, of course, you may not need others partners, but experiences on TLN mobility programs have shown that this partnership, that is a really, really important issue here. So again, the dual competence of actors, target group, and the transnational cooperation. So when I mean the transnational project has to be an integral part is that you have to think about if the participant comes back from the mobility phase, for instance, with all these new competences gained maybe and changes in attitude, in motivation, the project has to have something to offer to him because or her. Because if they come back and there's nothing there in the region, all this motivation and may have gone then, and that makes no sense. So just let me see. Yes, maybe it's worthwhile to mention that this partnership, this regional national partnership, can look very differently because it depends on the target group you deal with and the labor market systems in your country or region. So, for instance, for Germany, for the programs, it was obligatory to have to involve job centers and even companies to make sure that there is something to offer to the participant once he comes back from the mobility phase. But the job centers, the reason for the job centers was that they have had the best access to this target group because this target group was on the welfare system. That's a typical German thing and may not apply to other countries. I remember that, for instance, for Czech Republic, and the program was working with youngsters from the Roma community. It wasn't the job centers, but it was youth organizations who had the access to them. So you have to look what kind of target group you are working with, and then to have the right actors on board in order to go through all the phases. So access, recruitment, and selection, then preparation, working with them, and in the end, in the follow-up phase, offer something to them. So the second thing, of course, is the transnational partnership. And maybe you can already go to the next slide for that. So to send this vulnerable target group abroad requires a very reliable transnational partnership. And here are some key elements that project operators from previous TLN programs pointed out. So clear agreements between sending and hosting organizations, including types of participants involved, structure and content of activities before and during the stay abroad, cooperation and decision-taking, communication between partners, and risk management in case that something goes wrong. Important is to have written agreements covering all key aspects of setting up and implementing the stay abroad, which should be prepared and signed by both sides at the beginning. And Migle mentioned it already, so you have as potential applicants and projects for the ALMA call, you have the four months then where you can set up these partnerships, which is very lucky because not all of the TLN mobility programs had this luxury. So you will have a budget for that and you will have time for that. If you need it, some of the projects have already transnational or contacts to transnational partners, which was the case also with the previous TLM mobility programs, maybe from the Equal Community Initiative, maybe from Erasmus+. So it's not. It also depends then on the project, individual projects, if they have to invest more time and resources in that or not. There is a very detailed example of a partnership agreement in the annex 1 of the manual. And there's a very, very good document building up transnational partnership from the finding process to a sustainable partnership of high quality, which came from a Swedish-German project of the German EDA program. And this is an annex to the FAQ, which is also available at the ESF agency website of our Lithuanian partners. Okay. Only maybe I should mention a bit or say a few words then on the partner search, because I've learned from Mikle that there were many questions about this partner search and how to find this transnational partner. There is the partner search database at the moment, currently at the a section under the TLM mobility website. The difficulty is a bit that this ALMA initiative comes in the gap of 2 ESF funding periods. So what I've heard is that some of you were a bit pessimistic because you said in the partner search database, many of the projects have already expired. Expired means the sending aspect, because that's where you get the money for and what is the program. So for hosting, you are independent. So many of the projects listed there are still willing to host partners, because that will be paid by the sending project and is not linked to a program, which has, of course, ended because the ESF 2014 till 2020 period has ended, and the new one, there are new programs to start. Maybe I should mention that as well. I know from the German Juventus program that it will start in March. I know that in Catalonia, the program is still running, and I think that for Czech Republic, they are planning to start a program in spring as well. So there will be new contacts then on the partner search database very soon, I think. And one sentence to this. Of course, you are free to find partners elsewhere from previous contacts, whatever. The partner search database was support to projects during TLM mobility, because who is listed there, you can be sure that it's a serious project and a project which knows how to work with these participants. Otherwise, it's up to projects to decide if this transnational partner is reliable. So it was meant as an extra support tool. Okay, next one. Now, once the project is set up, so it's to find participants, recruitment and selection process. And as I said before, that there are some challenges as well, because there might be a number of obstacles participants from disadvantaged backgrounds may face when it comes to participate in mobility projects, which has to be taken into account then by project operators. They may be discouraged with education, vocational training, and assisting opportunities in the labor market, and thus might need special measures to encourage and stimulate their participation. So, for instance, project operators should use methods that enable them to reach a target group, are appropriate for the target group, and encourage, motivate, and stimulate the target group to participate. And there's a lot more explanation than in the manual for different examples on how to do this. Next one. So once they have been recruited, it's the selection process, and as the target groups are likely to lack formal qualifications, project operators would need non-traditional selection procedures and methods to reveal the non-academic competences and potential of participants. So the purpose is to identify who participants who with the right support will benefit from participation and can cope with the stay abroad, taking into account that sometimes that might become apparent only during the preparation phase. And the blue box shows an example here of key questions. And again, there is more detailed explanation in the manual. Maybe I should add that it's also important to think about alternatives for those participants who are not selected, because it's not the right thing for everyone. So it doesn't fit for everyone. So in the selection process, you have to see if the participants, one is the potential, if he might benefit from the measure, but the other thing is if he can or she can cope with the stay abroad. Next one. I'm looking at the time and see that it's running, so maybe I go very, very shortly. It's the ALMA participant preparation, length, intensity of participants, participants preparation can vary and depends on the target group. So participants from the labor market, far from the labor market, may need more support than others. There's not one curriculum that would fit for all, and you will find two examples in the manual. One more extensive from Czech Republic, working with most vulnerable groups like Roma, and one straighter one from Slovenia. However, the key elements are individual learning development plans for each participant, baselining participants' competences jointly with him, including self-assessment, and an example of potential questions used by project operators you can see in the box here. The purpose of the assessment is to work out participants' potential to benefit from the measure given the support available, so not at every price. Next one. There's also a little section on the importance of mentoring and the role of mentors, continuity, building trust, dealing with conflicts, and then a structured program of activities directly preparing the participants for the stay abroad. And you can see some of the activities here, and it's has been very much appreciated by participants from the previous programs. If the host partner is involved in this process, maybe by video, so that participants get some information on the country, foreign country or region where they will go to, can ask questions, and on the other hand, the host partner can already meet participants. So it's this direct contact has been proven very, very useful. Next one. Okay, the stay abroad then, the duration is minimum 2 months. There has to be a support program including social and cultural activities. There are different types in the previous TLN mobility programs. There were different types of accommodation depending on the target group and the participants' needs. So some were accommodated in hotels or in hostels, some with host family or flat sharing. Mentoring during the stay abroad also should be appropriate to participants' need, not too much, but not less. And here are some experiences listed from the TLN programs. I think this is quite self-explaining, so I think we could go to the next slide in order to keep to the timeline here. So participant follow-up, this is really an essential part of the project, as it shall prepare for the reintegration into employment, education, and training. So the purpose is to use the experience in the foreign country for the integration strategy. It requires, again, a strong cooperation in the regional project network. Also, the host organization should be involved in these programs because the participants, the competences the participant gained were abroad, and therefore the host partner knows about that and should be involved in this process of working out and recording participants' progress. Then support and guidance to reflect on competences gained during the stay abroad, also measuring soft outcomes and distance travels. And as Nigle mentioned in her presentation earlier, that could mean changes in attitude, changes in motivation, or in everyday managing independence or similar things. To prepare an implementation plan for each participant and to sensitize employers for the potential of participants. Maybe I should shortly mention that this phenomenon of culture shock. So if the participants, you must imagine, if they come back, they have changed, but not their surrounding may not have been changed. So the problems are still there. And now they have to deal with that, with this contradiction. And therefore, it's really important to have support and guidance from the project operators, which is a really relevant issue in the follow-up phase. Thank you. No, one next slide, I meant. So there's a lot of ALMA support on EU level with the Lithuanian ESF agency website. There's a link of the ALMA manual, and there's still from the TLN mobility website some useful information here. Thank you very much. Okay, just kept to my time scale, I hope.
Thank you, Bettina, for a very interesting presentation. And I picked some questions. So we would like that you could answer from your experience. Question is, how many partners per project is the best?
I don't think you can answer that because it really depends. So, and that was what Migla already mentioned in her presentation. Just if you, I mean, you know the project operators, you as project operators know your region, you know what target group you want to work with, and then make sure that the right actors to go through all the phases of the project cycle are on board. And that doesn't have to be formal partnerships. This could be informal as well. But the important thing is that you have the contacts and all is needed for the participants.
Thank you. The next question is probably from your experience. Is there any minimum or maximum length according to participant preparation activities?
Maybe that question came before I mentioned so it's not. It depends on the target group, and we have quite different examples from the TLM mobility programs. It depends if it's, for instance, for Slovenia and Catalonia, it were participants with secondary education or maybe even university degree, and if you have those from far away from the labor market, from most disadvantaged backgrounds, like it was in Germany and then in the second call in Czech Republic, you need more. You need for the preparation also soft skills or to develop soft skills, to develop team building, to develop dealing with conflicts. And so it really depends on the target group. So there is no curriculum one for all. But that means, of course, on the other hand, that you are quite flexible, so you can adjust to your target group, which is an asset, of course, if there are not too strict regulations for it.
and we have 2 minutes before the coffee break, and I still have a couple questions, but maybe the one we can answer. It's is it good project result if participant decides to stay in the hosting organization or in country for employment or education training?
Well, it's not reflected in the program results, but that's an issue, of course, which kept member states at some point from joining in this program because they were afraid of losing brain drain and people are leaving. So the purpose of this program is not that they will find a job in another country. It can happen, of course, but it hasn't happened often, I must say. So it was an exception, and I mean, if you look at the target group, it's not those who really go abroad, but it's not exclusive, so it can happen. And it wouldn't affect the, of course it would be a good result, but it's not the purpose of the program.
Thank you, Bettina, for your answers. And now we will have about 15 minutes virtual coffee break. We look forward to welcoming you all back welcome back, all of you. I hope you have a real coffee cup during a virtual coffee break. So now we can continue with our information session. So the next presenter is my colleague, Dalia Justinavičiūtė-Bulkevičė, project coordinator from European Social Fund Agency. She will present the key aspect of finance, budget, and will give tips for usage of 2 calculators, which we prepared for your convenience. Dear Dalia, it is my pleasure to yield the floor to you.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see my presentation. So I'm very pleased to see you so many today and that you find the ALMA call for proposals interesting. Some of you in the ALMA network. So it's very nice to see ALMA call information session. My name is Dalia. I am a project coordinator of the ALMA team. So today I would like to tell you how the finance works in the ALMA call. So let's get started to the table of contents. Briefly, what I will talk about you today. First of all, as I see, we have some technical issues, as my colleague saying. So one. So I'm very hope that you hear me much better now. Yeah. So the table of contents, what I will present today. So first of all, project budget and funding. Secondly, expenditures eligibility rules. The third topic is supporting documents and tools. And the last one, calculation methods. Moving to the next slide, when we talk about the budget and funding of the ALMA call for proposals, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the form of the grant set out in this call for proposals is an action grant, which takes the form of contributions of lump sum, unit costs, and financing not linked to costs. A possible individual grant range between 300,000 euro to 650,000 euro per project, not more than 80% of the project's total budget. A co-financing of at least 20% must come from beneficiary or partners' own resources. It's important that it cannot be financed from the other funds provided by the European Union funds. Lump sums, unit cost, and FNLC will be calculated by applying the co-financing rate to the total estimated eligible costs. The overall lump sum, together with the unit cost and FNLC, will be fixed in the grant agreement as the maximum grant amount. Moving to the next slide. Under ALMA, the project expenditures for activities can be divided into the following categories. So first, costs related to the organizational setup. For example, search of partners, project preparation, management during project implementation, meetings, expert advice and consultancy, translation and interpretation, hire facilities, etc. The second, cost related to the selection, preparation, and training of the participants, as well as to the follow-up activities. For example, recruitment, preparation, supervision, placement search, debriefing, and reintegration into the labor market or education. And the third part is costs related to the mobility of individual participants. For example, travel, accommodation, subsistence, insurance, and social security costs. Moving to the next. Here, you should note and pay attention that only organizations that will act as beneficiaries may submit application under this call. It means if the application is successful, the grant agreement will be signed by the beneficiary and all related costs will be reimbursed to the beneficiary. Partners' costs are possible, but the beneficiary will be responsible for payment and reimbursement of these costs. So pay attention. The financial responsibilities and distribution of them among the partners must be addressed in the partnership agreement. Moving next, when we talk about expenditures and eligibility in this call, it should be noted that the types of expenses, eligibility, and calculation depend on which phase of the project we are talking about, startup or implementation. So in the following part of the presentation, I will present the possible eligible expenses, their calculation and supporting documents in the startup and in the implementation phase. So the first, eligible expenses in the startup phase are meant to be related with the search for partners. For example, travel, accommodation, and subsistence associated with partner search or visiting the potential partners, staff costs for performing mentioned tasks, external advice of drafting partnership agreements and other documentation necessary for project implementation, and other costs related to finding partners. For example, meetings inside the country for building up partnerships, collection of material, content, translations, etc. Expenditures for activities in this phase can be submitted based on unit cost and real cost. It's important to say that the startup phase is not mandatory or could be shorter than 4 months for the beneficiaries who have signed the partnership agreements before application submission. The implementation phase is compulsory for all projects to be supported under this call. Please note that if you do not act at the startup phase, the maximum duration of the implementation phase is 14 months. Moving next, Once we know what expenses are possible, the next question is how we will calculate these expenses. So for costs related to the startup phase, unit costs and/or the draft budget based on real costs, we have created the calculator of expenses. It is Annex 2 of Call Conditions to support applicant with producing a draft budget that contains staff costs based on historic data, travel cost, subsistence, travel and accommodation costs using the unit costs, which are set out in the decision by the European Commission, and additional costs accumulating real cost for travel and meetings in the country. Of course, an exception of traveling, which is not determined in the decision. Also, translation and other services that are necessary for achieving the deliverables of the startup phase. And of course, indirect costs that are calculated for all eligible expenses of startup phase up to a maximum of 7%. Moving next. In order to make it easier to see schematically what costs for beneficiaries may incur, how they are calculated, and what documentation need to submit with the application form, in this table I would like to present to you the basic principles. It's important to say that eligible expenditures for the project activities must be incurred during the duration of the project, except costs relating to the submission of the project final report. During the startup phase, to define the unit cost, the hourly rate is used, and the calculation is based on the 1,720 hours method. So hourly rate is a unit cost per beneficiary in euro per hour, and it calculated annual payroll. It's a total staff costs per employee or a corresponding position with the beneficiary organization per year in euro, divided by maximum number of hours per full-time employee per calendar year. That 1,720 hours. And staff costs must be based on data from similar projects or historical personal salary data provided by the beneficiary, or data about the salary normally applied in the organization for the same or similar functions or duties, for example, by providing a certificate on the average wages of a specific employee for 12 months. Certificate on the average wage of employees of a relevant position or performing similar functions. Or it also could be publicly available information about the average wages in the beneficiary organization or a similar one. And for staff costs, you need to submit salary calculation certificate for hourly rate for staff using annual and completed example you can find in our webpage for support to applicants. And the second eligible direct cost part is travel and subsistence based on unit costs. So as unit costs, in accordance with the method set out in Annex 2 of the call conditions, falling under a decision by the European Commission, when you calculate these expenses, it means that no additional information and documentation required. And the third eligible direct cost part is other goods, works, and services based on real costs. These expenses included to produce the startup phase deliverables, for instance, costs to the rules of factors and supplies. Then for expenses calculation, please note that offers must be equivalent and the lowest price or price average should be selected. To support these expenses, with the application form, you need to submit the calculation certificate for other good works and services, and at least 2 preliminary commercial offers of service providers or summary of price survey, or screenshots with the corresponding information published in public information sources, for example, websites, or equivalent historical data of previous projects, which allow to justify the costs. I need to remind that the beneficiaries must serve a supporting documentation used for the calculation to determine the hourly rate and produce it upon request during control checks. Moving next, we have looked at the potential costs and how to calculate them. And I would like to point out that a lump sum for activities of a startup phase will be established during the assessment of application and based on the draft budget submitted and linked to work packages. In this phase, all beneficiaries that have established a national and at least one transnational partnership are entitled to receive the reimbursement of the lump sum for setting up partnerships and preparing all the expected deliverables of the startup phase. The eligibility of the deliverables will be assessed with the periodic report in the portal reporting tool. And the transition from the startup phase to implementation phase will happen when beneficiary presents the deliverables from the startup phase. And moving to the tips, I would like to give some practical tips for the startup phase. So first of all, make a list of potential partners and countries you want to work with. Use a calculator to plan activities and costs. It is designed to make planning easier for applicants. For your convenience, we have provided a completed example startup phase calculator and salary calculation certificate. So please check our website for support to applicants. And I need to remind that calculating travel has never been so easy. Just use the European Commission decision to plan your future meetings with partners. And please note that the calculator is designed to be calculated in euros. If you need to convert currencies, please use a static currency converter that provides the European Commission's official monthly euro exchange rate and conversion rates, as indicated in the startup calculator notes. Please note that the calculator is programmed in Excel in English in order to make it equally understandable for all applicants. Make sure you use Excel in English when completing the calculator. So moving next, now we have seen the startup phase. And let's move to the second phase of the project, implementation phase. I will shortly present the possible eligible expenses, calculation, and supporting documents in this phase. Expenses for activities in the implementation phase include, first, a daily rate, additional daily amounts for the mobility phase, if relevant, because of the classification of member states into 3 groups, and top up for the successful participants based on the Delegated Act for ALMA. Pay attention here. In the Delegated Act, you also see a daily top up for the participants that receive an allowance from the beneficiary, but this top up is not covered by this call, so do not use it for your application. Then also possible expenses related to the project final report, monitoring and assessment activities. For example, staff costs and other additional costs such as meetings, collection of material related to the project activities, and the expenses for dissemination of experience and the best practices. Such as meetings and seminars, video creation, publications, translation of documentation, and etc. Moving next, So for costs related to the implementation phase, the use of simplified cost options and FNLC is mandatory, as stipulated in the Delegated Act for ALMA. For this phase, we have created another calculator of expenses. It's Annex 3 of call conditions, which includes expenses that can be calculated by using EU-level ALMA simplified cost options and FNLC for the pilot exchanges, and draft budget based on real cost for preparation of the final report and dissemination of experience and best practices. Do not forget to include the expenses related to preparation of evaluation of participants. Just remember that the activity of participant evaluation, you should start when the participant starts the activity and end at the follow-up activity. Please note that the self-assessment questionnaire for ALMA internship participants is published on our website. This is a guideline and example form, but if you have your own, of course, you can use it. And it's also important to mention here the rules of applying indirect cost in this phase. Please note that the ALMA Delegated Act already includes indirect costs and cover all the costs of the operation, preparation of the participants' mobility and follow-up phases, as well as the daily top-up for successful participants. So no indirect cost shall be added to these activities. And the indirect cost for preparing final report and dissemination activities must be calculated separately as flat rate not exceeding 7% of the eligible costs for these activities. All calculation is included and explained in our calculator. So all you have to do is enter the numbers in spaces provided. And moving next. During the implementation phase, you may incur 3 different categories of direct costs. So the first, as you can see also from the calculator for implementation phase, is related to ALMA operational activities, preparation, mobility, and follow-up. For the implementation of these activities, ALMA simplified cost options and FNLC, such as already mentioned, a daily rate, additional daily amounts for the mobility phase, and top-up for the successful participants are used. And cost must be calculated in accordance with the Delegated Act for ALMA. Here on the slide, you can find the link to the Delegated Act. Because of simplification used, no additional information and documentation required. And moving next, so we have looked at the Delegated Act for ALMA and how to use it in your application. And I would like to point out that participants' preparation, mobility, and follow-up costs will be paid on an actual basis at fixed rates in accordance with the Delegated Act. And once again, the Delegated Act already includes indirect costs and cover all the costs of the operation, so no indirect cost shall be added for this phase. Receive of the reimbursement of simplified cost options and FNLC, you need to implement needs preparation, mobility, follow-up activities, and declare them in the periodic report. And moving next, during the implementation phase, the second and third categories of the direct costs for preparation of the final report and dissemination activities are the same as I said in the startup phase. So it is a staff cost based on historic data and 1,720 hours method is used. And the second, other goods, works, and services based on real costs. For this cost, here I already mentioned documentation you need to submit with your application form. And moving next, after the calculation and documentation part for preparation of the final report and dissemination activities, I would like to point out that the detailed draft budget of expenditures based on real costs. A lump sum for each work package will be defined after the assessment of detailed draft budget. And to receive the reimbursement of the lump sum, beneficiary needs to prepare all the expected deliverables of the implementation phase and declare in the periodic report. Moving to the tips, next slide. I would like to give some practical tips for the implementation phase. So first, plan the countries where mobility activities will take place in. Then use a calculator for implementation phase to plan activities and costs. Once again, please check our completed example calculator in our website for support to applicants. And then use Delegated Act to plan ALMA operational activities. In the calculator for implementation phase, you will need to determine the persons of successful ALMA participants. So be sure to set a more realistic percent, not 100% for successful participants, but for example, at around 70%. Assess whether the project needs to use indexation by Eurostat. Note that indexation is only possible if Eurostat data from 2022 are available. For your understanding, the inflation rate is calculated accordingly. 2022 annual average index divided by 2021 annual average index L and multiply by 100%. And of course, once again, do not forget to calculate costs in euro and use Excel in English when completing the calculator. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found this part of the session useful, and that it will make the financial part of your ALMA application much easier. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dalia, for your presentation, useful information. And I see we have lots of questions, as I expected. So probably we'll start with some of them, but as I mentioned before, we will answer all questions and we will show them in our website. Will be answered all questions. So the first question is, could young people with disability taking part and are costs related to accessibility? For example, assistance during their placement, are they eligible, those costs?
Yes. Yes, the target group with disabilities or other health issues could participate in this call. And the related expenditures are eligible. Just need to remind you that staff costs related to the implementation phase, you need to use simplified cost options and FNLC, as I mentioned, because it's mandatory as stipulated in the Delegated Act for ALMA.
Thank you, Darla. The next question is about budget calculator, which we prepared. So it's where it is written the number of participants as an example for pre-mobility during and follow-ups, why the number of participants are different. It should not be the same number during all pre-phase of the projects.
Yeah, yes, thank you for question. It's really a very good question. So ideally, the number of participants can be the same, but in practice, it can be anything actually. In the preparation mobility follow-up phases, the number of participants can vary for a wide variety of reasons. Prepared calculation is only the example because we want to show the situation that it could be different and practically sometimes and not so sometimes, often it's happen. So just understand that it's not mandatory like to have the same number of participants in preparation, mobility and follow-up phases.
Thank you, Dalia. The next question is about the circle, which Bettina explained. So the question is it only one circle planned? Or it could be only one circle?
Yes. About circles. Yeah, it could be more than one, but please take into account of the maximum possible amount is 650,000 euro, and the duration of the implementation phase is 14 months, so you should not exceed plan activities.
Thank you, Dalia. The next question, it's a tricky one, but maybe we can answer it. Can the companies receive financial aid for their commitment in the project? As I understood, it's about companies where our participant will have an internship.
Yes, for mobility activities, the fixed rates of the ALMA Delegated Act will be used, and it will be up to the applicant to decide for which activities they will be used in order to achieve the project objectives, including and possibility.
Okay. The next question is about the cost of organizational setup. Do costs for organizational setup include preparatory visits?
Yes. The costs for the organizational setup, you can use the flat rate to 7% of a startup phase, visiting national or transnational partners.
The next question is more about pre-finance advance, but my colleague will explain more, but maybe we can answer it. Will there be an advance payment to kickstart the project? What will be the percentage of lump sum? Then during the project, will there be down payment? So the first is yes. It will be advance payment up to 50% of the grant, and it depends of all financial assessments, risk assessment carried out before signing the grant agreement. In case of acceptable risk, the frequency and the amount of the foreseen pre-financing may be adjusted, and an additional pre-financing may be provided. So all those requirements will be defined in the grant agreement. So we have a couple minutes. The question is, I would like to ask, is it possible to put administration costs, for example, manager and staff costs? Dalia, your floor.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, for all administrative staff, you will get a maximum 7% for indirect costs. So you can use it for, I don't know, like manager to administrate everything, right? So it's indirect costs, and all costs that related for participants to prepare them to preparation, mobility, and follow-up phases. You also can use staff costs. It depends, you know. You need to understand this different. That if manager, as we can call manager now, working with a target group. So it's direct costs, right? The target group organizing and training them. But if it's only like, I don't know, to prepare documentation or something, you should use indirect costs then.
Thank you, Dalia. We have question about how will be the lump sum defined. If I understood correctly, it will be established during assessment after application form.
Yes, thank you for your question. Really, really good question. And as I mentioned, with application form, you need to prepare that two calculator for startup phase and for implementation phase. And if costs are based by real costs, as I showed in my table, you need to prepare salary calculation certificate, and after submission, together with experts, we looked up that documents, and yes, before signing grant agreement, lump sum will be defined. And when you start your project, you already know the lump sum for activity.
Thank you, Dalia. The next, we still have couple minutes. Question about would the 80% covered by grant cover as well as the mobility of participants, as will the grant cover 100% of the mobility? It's mean about all projects, not only mobility activities.
Yes, so as I mentioned, only 80% will be covered, and 20% should be co-financed by beneficiary or partners. But yes, it's also a mandatory rule.
Thank you for your questions. So the rest question will be answered after our training session. So I will thank you, Dalia, for answering. And we are going to the next presenter. So it's my colleague, Janina Bendinskienė, project coordinator from the European Social Fund Agency. She will present structure of the application form, will highlight essential parts and give advices for filling it. I invite you, Janina, to present your slides.
Thank you, Renata, and good afternoon for everyone. As you can see from the title of the presentation,
we have some technical. Unmute yourself, Janina.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
so it is good. Thank you, Renata.
We are trying to check what's this problems. Janina, we cannot hear you.
Maybe only Renata didn't hear me.
Yeah, from the audience, Renata, we can hear Janina. So I think it's from your side.
Okay. So one more time, good afternoon for everyone. As you can see from the title of the presentation, I will talk about the application form.
I think this will help you to get off a smoother start of completing and submitting your application. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So where to begin? The first, you need to create an account if you haven't already, and then log into the Electronic Social Innovation Information System. For simplicity, I will use the abbreviation ESINIS below. So for creating an account, you must fill in the request for access form. Once you have filled it in, you will receive email with a link to access ESINIS. So please provide a correct email on the request for access form. If it is incorrect, you will not receive an email with the login link. Also, it is important to read the description of a procedure for data submission via ESINIS. So please also note that by completing the request for access form and indicating that the above description has been read, the person registering ensures that he or she has been granted the right to apply by the organization. After logging into your ESINIS account, you will see 3 options: application, communication, and terms and conditions. Application part is for filling in the application, viewing its data, in other words, for everything what is related to the application. Communication part is for communication with the agency. Here you can ask questions and see the answers you have received. And finally, the terms and conditions part provides the mentioned description of the procedure for data submission via ESINIS. Next slide, please. Another question is how to start filling in the application form. I think it is very simple. You should choose the application part in ESINIS from the 3 possible choices. Here you will find a button that allows you to start filling in the application form. Clicking on it will open a new window asking you to enter the title of your application. Don't worry if you need to change it in the process. You will be able to do this in the general information section of the application form under application title. So we have looked at the start of filling in the application form. Now let's look at all parts of the application to give you a better understanding of application in the ESINIS. In this slide, you can see all parts of the application form. I can say that there are 13 in total. 2-way arrows in the scheme mean that you can move between parts in the application form as you wish. There is no mandatory order. I would also like to mention that if in the application form on the left side you only see white lines on the blue background, as shown in the right corner of the slide, click on them and then the full menu will appear for you. Next slide, please. The general information section is for general information about application. It is title of the application and its abbreviation, summary of the project. I should mention that the abbreviation is indicated as an acronym on the application form. In this section, you also must indicate if a very similar application has been submitted under other EU programs, and if so, provide more details. To do this, you will need to select the underline option on the ESINIS, like shows the slide, and a field will then appear for you to filling in. In addition, the system automatically fills the call information. It is number and title. In summary, do not include any confidential information. Use plain text, avoid formula and other specific character. Do not look for Save button once all or part of general information fields have been completed in this section, because information is saved automatically. Let's move on. In participants section, the information of the applicant and partners, if already known, must be filled in. It is legal name, official legal form, legal status, address, and other information. A new card must be created for each participant. To do this, click on the Add New Participant button. Then filling in the applicant information, the information about is beneficiary must be ticked, and additional columns, which only applies to the applicant of legal representative who is supposed to sign the grant agreement will then appear. Only one beneficiary is possible. Once the information has been filled in, you will need to press the Save button or cancel if you don't want to keep it. You can edit the participant information that has already been saved at any time. To do this, you need to click on the arrow icon next to each participant. If you have added a participant incorrectly, you can remove it by any time by clicking Bin icon. In work package section must be provided a detailed description of the project activities and budget. A work package means a major subdivision of the project. As in the case of participant, the Add New Work Package button should be clicked to create a work package. After clicking it, you will need to enter the name of the work package and enter the specific objectives to which the work package is linked. Once the information has been entered, you must save it by clicking the Save button. After saving the information, you will see the data as shown in the slide image. Given the terms of call conditions, we recommend that separate work packages are set up. The lump sums will be determined during the evaluation of the applications. This would mean that preparation of the final report and dissemination of experience and the best practices, which are foreseen in the implementation phase, are recommended to split into separate work packages. Next, please. After creating the work package, you will need to select Activities section and create as many activities as you are planning in the work package. To create an activity, click Add New Activity button and fill in all the requested information. Once the information has been entered, you must save it by clicking the Save button. Be specific and give a short name for each activity. Describe planned activities and their necessity. The description of the activity should make it clear what is planned, the duration, the number of target group, and etc. Please do not include cost description in this section. Show who will be responsible for the proper and timely implementation. One back, please, slide. Show who will be responsible for the proper and timely implementation of the activity. This may not necessarily be the applicant, but one of the partners, if it is agreed. The leader of the activity should be listed under participant column. Please note that only one participant can be assigned per activity in the participant column. If activity will be carried out by several participants, please specify them in the activity description section. It means that the participant column can be selected only one main participant responsible for the activity. In simple terms, the following questions should be taken into account: what, how, where, when, and who. Now, please, next slide. Once you have completed all the activities, you can proceed to filling in the budget information. In the application form, it is called Cost of Work Packages. To do this, you will need to select the Cost of Work Packages column in the Work Package part. It is easier to see under the euro sign, as was shown in the image on the slide about work packages. Click on it and you will see the following window like in this slide image. However, I will mention that the budget can also be completed before the activities are detailed, because costs are filled in for the work package, not for the activities. As the ALMA call conditions require the use of prepared calculators to calculate the cost of startup and implementation phases, when you fill in the budget, you will need to click on the blue plus sign in the application form, then enter the title and the amount calculated in the calculator, and finally attach the completed calculator. Please note that the detailed justification of the expenditure would also need to be provided in the dedicated field in the calculator, so you do not need to separately detail the expenditure by categories in this application form section. Also, please note that you should only enter the amount of the direct cost from the calculator, and the amount of indirect cost will calculate it automatically by the system. However, please note that for implementation phase, specifically preparation, mobility, and follow-up activities, the ALMA scores apply and no additional indirect cost should be calculated. It is important to note here that it will be necessary to indicate if the indirect costs are applicable. By default, 7% is entered as this is the percent allowed under the terms of call. However, you can edit it if you wish and set it lower. The information entered in this section is saved automatically and you don't need to look for the Save button. Let's move on. Deliverables section must be completed with the information on the deliverables to be achieved. To add a deliverable, click Add Deliverable button and then select from the list. The list is generated by the call conditions. There is no option to add your own deliverables. It is important to assign the work package that will achieve the deliverable, provide a description, and indicate if it is public or not. A single deliverable can be assigned to several work packages. Once the information has been entered, you must save it by clicking the Save button. Next slide. In theory of change section, I think there is nothing specific about. You should use pencil or arrow icons to enter the information. The activity information is automatically filled in based on the information entered in the work package. After filling in each field, remember to save it with the Save button. And moving on to the next slide, I think the next part of the application is one of the easiest. Why? You will understand. Because timetable fills up automatically from the information previously entered. It summarizes information on the work package, activities, participants, costs, and time available for implementation. Another table about budget also fills in automatically. The only thing you will need to fill in here is the information about revenue. To do this, you need to select the appropriate option from the list. If a revenue is expected to be generated, then you will have to enter the amount of revenue and indicate during which work package implementation the revenue will be generated. The information in the budget section is also saved automatically. Moving on to award criteria section, in which information about award criteria has to be filled in. First, you need to indicate if you are applying for the award criteria. If you do not qualify for an award criteria, then simply move on to the next part of the application form. Once you have ticked that the award criteria are applicable, you will need to click on the Add New Award Criteria button and select the award criteria you want to apply from the list in the window, and then provide a description of your eligibility for the selected award criteria. And be sure to save the information using the Save button. Other criteria should be added in the same way, and each award criteria can be selected once. Move on. The relevance, quality, and impact sections are for such information. It is what is about project relevance, quality, impact must be filled in. When you open each section, you will see the elements it consists of. They are similar. Click on the arrow icon and enter the information. Be sure to save the information you have entered by clicking the Save button. If you don't want to save, then Cancel button will help. There is no set order, so you can fill the order you prefer. To clarify what information is needed for each part, please use the instructions from the PDF application form, which is available in the Support to Applicants section in the call documentation on agency website. On the end of slide, you will see the link. Annex section contains information about the annexes of the application. Here you will see the documents uploaded in the work package cost section. Also, here you can add any other documents you need. This is easy to do. Just click Add New Document button, fill in the necessary information, attach the file, and press Add button. In addition, in this section, you will be able to download, edit the information, not in the attachment itself, but in the attachment card, or remove the attached file. Please note that all mandatory annexes specified in call conditions must be attached to the application. If you do not attach some, the system will give you an error and you will not be able to submit your application. Moving next. The review and submit part is for checking that all the required fields have been completed and for submitting the application. The validate button must be clicked for checking. If there are errors in the application, the system will list them and indicate the part of the application where the error was found. Clicking on the pencil icon will take you straight to where you need to go. You will be able to submit your application only if there are no errors. To submit your application, click Submit button. After submitting your application, you will receive an email notification confirming that your application has been successfully submitted. So, we have looked at all parts of the ESINIS application form. I hope you didn't find the application form difficult, and I think you will be able to fill it successfully. We are now close to the end of the presentation and only a few slides remain. So, let's move on. Here are some tips for working with the application form. When you fill in the application form, we recommend you also have a PDF version of application, as this will show you what you need to fill in each field. It can be said that the PDF version of application contains instructions for completing the application. This will ensure that you take into account all aspects of providing the required information. A PDF version of application is published under Support to Applicants in the call documentation on agency website. As I mentioned before, if in the ESINIS application form on the left side you see white lines on the blue background, click on them and you will see all the parts of the application form. If you don't receive emails from ESINIS, check your spam box. Add all the mandatory annexes, as you will not be able to submit your application if some of them are not attached. Mandatory annexes are specified in the call conditions. All parts of the application form may be edited before submission. If you are not sure if you have filled in everything, you can check at any time by going to the review and submit part and clicking the validate button. Next slide. And this slide shows where you can find help and what information is available in the support for applicants section of the call conditions on agency website. I recommend to watch, for example, video of filling in the application form or to look at questions session, and after our presentation we will put there all answers. So I hope the presentation didn't take too long and provided you with some knowledge on how to fill in the ESINIS application form. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elena. We have still questions to answer according to application form, and we received for now one question. Does the system allow more than one application with the same beneficiary? For instance, if there are several projects around the same country, who should fulfill the application? The national ministry in charge of this program, and then set regional government as partner, or every regional government itself? Janina, will you answer it?
Yeah, I think yes. In the system, it can be done more than one application form by the same person. And about the second part, if I understand it well, it must depend on your decision of who will be the beneficiary and who will be the partner. So you are proposed the option could fully meet the requirements of the call. So inside you have to decide who will be the beneficiary and the partner, like I said.
Thank you. Thank you, Janina. I'm happy to present our last presenter of today's session. So it's my colleague, Jūratė Kuodytė, Project Coordinator from European Social Fund Agency. She will present the assessment and selection procedure, eligibility and award criteria. Dear Jūratė, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Renata. I'm thrilled to be with you today, and I hope you still have the energy to listen to the last presentation. Last but not least, in the next half an hour, I will introduce you with the application assessment and selection process, admissibility and eligibility requirements, and award criteria for applications. So let's get started. The assessment and selection of applications leading up to the signing of the grant agreement is a long and complex process, the main steps of which you can see in the slide. After submission of applications, the check of the admissibility and eligibility will be carried out. We have combined these two checks into a single stage. The applications found admissible and eligible will be assessed further against the award criteria defined in the call conditions. In other words, the next stage is an assessment of the quality of the application. It means the experts will assess the extent to which the applications meet the established award criteria. On the basis of this assessment, applications will be ranked and qualify for funding. The final decision on funding will be taken by the project selection committee in a selection panel. Once the funding decision is signed by the agency director, the grant agreement preparation process will start. Applicants will be asked to provide the documents needed to assess the applicant's financial capacity and other documents needed to prepare the grant agreement. It is expected to take about 6 months from the submission of the application to the signature of the grant agreement. Next slide, please. The admissibility of applications will be checked by the agency staff filling in a checklist form. In the checklist, there are 5 questions which have to be answered with yes or no. If at least one of the questions will be answered no, the application will be proposed for rejection and will not be forwarded for eligibility assessment. On this slide, you can see the criteria that must be met for an admissible application. Application, including annexes and supporting documents, must be submitted using the forms provided inside the e-Sinis. Applicants are encouraged to fill in the applications in English in order to speed up the assessment process. Next slide, please. Before submitting your application, please check that you have attached all mandatory documents. Failure to submit at least one of the mandatory annexes or supporting documents can result in rejection of the application. On the slide, you see a list of mandatory documents. It is necessary to submit the beneficiary's declaration, which is signed by the beneficiary's legal representative or his or her authorized representative. If the declaration is signed by an authorized person, a power of attorney is required. Partner declarations are mandatory annexes to the partner agreements. So if you are submitting with your application signed partner agreements, please check whether this mandatory annex is attached to the agreement. Applicants whose organizations are not validated by the Center Validation Service and don't have a participant identification code must provide the organization's registration certificate to prove organization's legal status and origin. In other words, if your organization has never participated in an EU program, it's likely that it is not validated, which makes the certificate mandatory. Next slide, please. The check of applications eligibility will be carried out by the agency's staff by completing a checklist. On the slide, you see all eligibility criteria listed. They are indicated in the call conditions. At this point, I would like to emphasize that the applicant must ensure that no other EU grant has been or will be awarded for the proposed project or any part of it. If at least one of the questions on the checklist will be answered no, the application will be proposed for rejection. Applicants of rejected applications will be informed about admissibility and eligibility check results with explained reasons for rejection and information on the complaints procedure. Next slide, please. All admissible and eligible applications will be forwarded for assessment against award criteria. The applications will be assessed individually by at least 2 experts. One of the assessors will be an agency staff member and the other an external independent expert from agency's own database or the European Commission's database of experts. The experts will assess the extent to which the project meets the award criteria set out in the call conditions. They will assess the applications individually by completing individual assessment form. If the scores of the 2 assessors differ by more than 20 points, a 3rd assessor will be appointed. At the end of the individual assessment, one of the experts will carry out a consolidated assessment in which the expert will determine the application's final score for each criterion and for the whole application. The final scores will be the average of the scores of the 2 individual assessments. All assessed applications will be presented, discussed one by one in the project selection committee panel. In the panel, the committee will examine the reasons for the rejected applications, will rank the applications with the passing scores, and will select the applications for funding. Before project selection committee panel, all applicants of above threshold applications will be checked if they are not in exclusion situation. Operational capacity check will be carried out together with the assessment of the quality award criterion. And the financial capacity check of the beneficiaries of the pre-selected applications will be performed during the preparation of the grant agreement. Applicants of rejected applications will be informed on the outcome of the assessment and on the possibility of lodging an appeal, together with assessment summary report, including reasons for rejection. Next slide, please. The award criteria are set out in the call conditions. As already mentioned, each criterion has a maximum and a minimum number of scores. An exception is made for the last 3 award criteria, which apply only to this call. Those 3 criteria do not have thresholds. An application meeting the selected criterion may receive 10 points. An application that does not meet the selected criterion will not receive any points, but will not be rejected for that reason. The maximum number of points that can be awarded to an application is 100. The overall threshold is 50 points. Therefore, if the application receives less than 50 points, it will be proposed for rejection. In addition, if an application does not achieve the minimum score for one of the criteria, it will be also proposed for rejection. Next slide, please. Let's analyze the award criteria. Each criterion consists of elements which will be considered while assessment of the applications. The experts will assess the extent to which the application fulfills each element of the criteria and will assign a general score to each criterion. Hence, if you want your application to be scored highly, you need to consider all the elements of the criteria when planning the implementation of your project and preparing your application. Let's look at the elements of the relevance criterion. The project must focus on the problem that really needs to be solved. The problem must be relevant to the target group, institutions involved, and other stakeholders. The need for the project must be justified and based on a sound, genuine, and adequate needs analysis supported by credible data. The objectives of the project must clearly address the specified needs. They must be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. The project must support general objectives of the call and the specific objectives of the ESF+. If the applicant or the partners have experience in the subject of the call or have already implemented projects related to youth, employment, mobility, etc., the application should explain how the project activities are complementary to the previous initiatives. The applicant should explain the added value of the project to the existing knowledge and experience of the organizations and persons involved. The experts will assess the extent to which the project provides a clear future use of the pilot results, which must be in line with the objective of the call, to learn from the pilot with a view of expanding of ALMA implementation under shared management under ESF+. The application should explain how the countries, regions of the participating institutions will benefit from participation in the project, and it should explain an added value of its results at local, regional, national, and EU level. I hope that you are still with me. So next slide, please. Okay, the maximum score for meeting the quality criterion is 30, which means that this criterion is given particular importance. Let's go to the elements of the criterion. The first group, project design and implementation. The project concept and methodology must be clear and logical. The application should explain how the implementation of all the proposed activities will logically lead to the achievement of the project objectives and to the meeting of the needs identified in the needs assessment. All the project phases should be clear, complete, interconnected, and interdependent. All activities should be necessary to achieve the objectives. The project must be cost-effective and allocate appropriate resources to each activity. The grant request should be realistic for good quality implementation of the planned activities. For expenses which are based on real cost, supporting documents must be provided. Please note that in case of unjustified or excessive project costs, the experts may propose to reduce the project budget. However, in this case, the application will be given a lower score for its quality. The second group is quality of the project partnership and the cooperation arrangements. Particular attention will be paid to the quality of the project partnership. The application should concretely identify which skills, experiences, expertise, and management support each of the participating organizations will make available to implement all aspects of the project. The project should demonstrate an appropriate distribution of roles and tasks and a balanced participation and input of the organizations. Presence of all the partners should be vital to project success. The project must have a clear project management structure and decision-making mechanism. The project should explain how regular and through which channels communication with partnership will be ensured. And the third group is quality assurance and monitoring. The project staff must have relevant qualifications and experience. For relevant competencies, please visit ALMA manual. It should be explained how it will be assessed whether and to what extent the project has reached its objectives and results. Monitoring and evaluation activities should be integrated at an early stage of the project and continue throughout the project implementation. The project should describe how it will ensure that no groups are excluded or treated differently. For example, how they will adapt outreach, engagement, and working methods to participants' specific needs, skills, and competencies. The applicant is required to carry out a risk analysis and to develop a risk management strategy. Next slide, please. And the third criterion is an impact of the project. The project should make clear how the target group and the participating organizations will benefit concretely from the project during and after the project lifetime and what would change for them. The project should also specify intended beneficiaries of the project results outside the project and what would change for them as well. The application has to explain how the expected outcomes and impact will be measured, what outcomes and impact indicators and methods of measurement will be applied. It should be described how the project activities will contribute to the promotion and improvement of gender equality and non-discrimination mainstreaming. The project should involve appropriate and qualitative measures to communicate and disseminate project results within and outside the participating organizations. It must involve mandatory and other additional dissemination activities which have to be proportionate to the size and scope of the project. It should be described how the results and benefits will be ensured and sustained after the EU funding ends, what financial sources and how they will be attracted. Next slide, please. Let's have a brief overview of the criteria that apply only to applications under this call. The first criterion is project target group most vulnerable needs. We encourage applications that do not plan an easy target group. In other words, not a creaming target group that could easily find a workplace even without being part of the project. In the context of the call, the most vulnerable young people are long-term unemployed, more than 12 months, inactive in the labor market, and not registered as unemployed, as well as young people who, due to physical or mental disability, are unable to find a job for a long time. If the applicant claims points for this criterion, the target group of the project must be at least 50% of the most vulnerable participants. The beneficiary must ensure that the proportion of the most vulnerable participants will be maintained throughout the life of the project. The second criterion is quality of the national network. The involvement of partners from different fields adds value and quality to the project. The involvement of employment agencies, job centers, public authorities, youth organizations, social services and vet providers, NGOs, schools and companies ensures access to the different types of expertise required. An application will receive 10 points if managing or intermediate bodies are applicant or partners of the application. The involvement of partners should be not formal and the applicant should prove that each project partner is vital for implementation of the work program. The third criterion is newcomer to ALMA program. The aim of the call is to ensure that ALMA is piloted in as many member states as possible. To contribute to this goal, we encourage applicants from countries newcomers to submit applications by awarding additional 10 points. Countries and regions newcomers are those which had not implemented ALMA type projects in 2014-2020 programming period. That period, projects similar to ALMA were implemented in Spain, Catalonia, Galicia, Czech Republic, Italy, Trento, Germany, Poland, Slovenia, and Sweden. And we have already received a question related to this criterion. It is believed that countries that already have ALMA type experience are less likely to receive funding. So our answer is that we encourage the countries or regions which have implemented ALMA type projects in the period 2014-2020 and have relevant experience apply for other award criteria. For example, we encourage them to select the target group of most vulnerable needs and thus get points for the criterion target group most vulnerable needs. Or you can apply the award criterion quality of the national network. So let's move to the next slide. The aim of the call, as I already said, is to support projects within all member states, and this aim has influenced the selection process. Thus, the application selection will be competitive, but will also involve geographical criteria. In the panel of the Project Selection Committee, project selection will be organized in several rounds. All above threshold applications will be grouped by the applicant country. In each round, the best top-ranked eligible project from each member state will be selected. Once the remaining money is insufficient to finance one top-ranked project from each member state in the round, grants will be awarded to the top-ranked applications regardless of the country of origin. Not funded applications will be put on the reserve list or will be rejected. Let's move to the next slide. So, dear colleagues, I'm almost at the end of my presentation, but before finishing it, I would like to introduce you very briefly to the project financing and reporting procedure. The project financing conditions will be defined in the grant agreement, which will be mono-beneficiary grant agreement, which means that the agreement will be signed only with the beneficiary, not partners, and the beneficiary will be responsible to the agency for the overall project implementation and management. The grant will be paid to the beneficiary and it will bear full financial and legal responsibility towards the agency. The general terms of the grant agreement you can find as an annex to the call conditions. Funding will be disbursed in the following order. 2 pre-financing installments and the final payment are planned. The first initial pre-financing payment of up to 50% of the grant. The second pre-financing payment of up to 30% of the grant. And the final payment after approval of the final report. The amount and frequency of pre-financing payments will depend on the beneficiary's financial capacity, which will be assessed during the grant agreement preparation on the basis of documents provided by the beneficiary. During the project implementation, the beneficiary will have to report regularly. It means to provide continuous reporting to the agency on the progress of the project using portal reporting tool. The beneficiary will have to submit a periodic report after 12 months or any other period specified in the grant agreement, and the final report after the project conclusion. As I have already said, specific reporting and payment schedule will be indicated in the grant agreement. And next slide, please. And at the very end, I would like to make a few recommendations to guide the preparation of the application. Please read the call conditions carefully. When filling in the application form, please read attentively the information to be provided in each section of the application. Be specific. The applicant is not required to have written partnership agreements. The startup phase is dedicated to the conclusion of partnership agreements. However, we strongly recommend that at least the national partners are identified at the application preparation stage, and that the division of roles and responsibilities is discussed with their representatives. The more homework you do before submitting your application, the more successful your project will be. As I mentioned above, the financial capacity of applicants will be assessed during the preparation of the grant agreement. The applicant's financial capacity will determine the project risk level. If a medium or high risk level will be identified, risk mitigation measures will be applied. For example, splitting of pre-financial payments, pre-financing guarantees, and etc. Therefore, the applicant should have a strong financial capacity. We recommend that application is submitted either by a financially capable applicant or by public body, because the verification of financial capacity is not applied to the public entities. Last but not least, do not miss the 5 p.m. of March 15. If you are even 1 second late, you will no longer be able to submit your application. Next slide, please. We have developed tools and supporting materials to help the applicants prepare and submit the application. Templates for mandatory annexes, calculators, an example of a filled-in application form you can find on the agency's website in the section Support to Applicants. Practical information on ALMA initiative you can find on the European Social Fund Plus website section. Find out more about ALMA program. All questions and answers are made public on the agency's website section Frequently Asked Questions. So if you have any question, please check here first to see if your question has already been answered. So dear colleagues, thank you for your patience and attention. I hope that the information you've heard will be useful in preparing your application. Some questions we've got I answered already during the presentation, and the rest of the questions we will answer and send to all the participants. So thank you once again for an active participation, and I wish you a successful work.
Thank you, Rita, for your presentation. And now we can have to answer some questions we received related to Jūratės topics. So the first question is, what do you mean by successful participants? Those who will come back and find a job on the local market. Jūratė, will you answer? Okay.
Turn on. Yes, exactly. Those participants who find a job and start working, And those participants who start vocational training or are integrated in education or into a labor market.
Thank you. And the next question. Is it compulsory to receive trainees from the countries where our participants are sent? Jūrate, your floor? Or maybe I can answer, no problem. So, no, it is not. The terms of the call condition do not stipulate that sending organization should accept participants from another country where participants are going, but we highly recommend it. The next question is it a requirement for sending organization applicants to have a previous mobility experience? Jūrate?
Okay, no, there is no requirement to have the previous mobility experience.
And next question is related to form. So it's please tell me what qualifies as an organization registration documents PIC number. I could answer. If your organization is already validated by Central Validation Service and you have a participant identification code, as you mentioned, PIC, which could be found in the register containing all participants of EU programs, so you don't need to submit any organization registration certificate. If you are not validated by the Central Validation Service, so you should provide documents which provide your organizational legal status. The next question, it's about somebody asked, could you please repeat those regional selection in rounds? So you write a floor.
Okay, so each above threshold applications will be divided according to the countries, and the selection will be organized in several rounds. So in the first round, each top ranked application from each country will be selected, and then will be, if money is enough, so the second round will be organized, and then each lower than top selected application will be selected.
Thank you, Jūrate. So maybe all other question is not directly related to Jūrate's topic, so we'll answer them later, and we'll send you all answers to your emails. So thanks to all today's presenters for the overview of key takeaways of the call. Thanks to all of participants for your time for our formation session, and thank you for technical support team. But before leaving, I would like kindly to remind you to fill in evaluation forms. Please find the link in the chat box. Please note that by answering questions 10, 12 in the evaluation form, you will provide information about your organization that will help you in your search for transnational partners in the ALMA call. Information on how to find partners will be published in our website. And now finally, we'd like to use this opportunity to take the family photo. Please open cameras and put your brightest smile. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this short information session and find presentation useful preparing the project proposal. And I wish you well for this afternoon. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Goodbye.